Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Christine Zellers, and I'm going to be presenting Food Label 411 to you this evening. I am from Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Cape May County, and I'm with the Family and Community Health Sciences Department of Rutgers Cooperative Extension. We have three departments, FCHS, Family Community Health Sciences, as I mentioned, is the one that I work for. Also, we have youth, 4-H youth and family development, 4-H and youth, and we also have A&R, which is agriculture and natural resources. So there are three departments, and we're located right in Cape May Courthouse in Cape May, New Jersey. I'd like to thank the Ocean City Library for hosting once again and having me. It's always a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to get underway and get us moving here. To start out, we have a few objectives to get today's discussion going. We're going to learn about how to read a nutrition facts label and the importance of the information that's found on that label. We're also going to discover the secrets that might be hidden on a packaging label. And finally, we're going to take all of those clues together on a food label and tie them together to see how looking at the whole label is critical to what you're putting into your body. So we'll look at the ingredients and we'll look at the actual packaging of the label in addition to the nutrition facts label. And we have a poll that I'm going to ask Julie to go ahead and release now, if you would please, Julie. The poll gives me an idea of the information that you already know and what you're already doing so that I have an indication of how to continue this program, and as I move forward, when we do it again, and ways, directions to go, things to develop and add to it. So if you would be so kind as to add that, I would really appreciate it. All right, so for purposes of clarification, I just wanted to give you the lingo that I'm going to be using. And I'm going to refer to the three areas of a food package. The first one shown here is the nutrition facts label. So that's the label that gives you all the different, the fat and the sugar and the calories, all those things. So nutrition facts label. And then the second thing is the ingredients label. And that says ingredients in bold in the beginning. And that lists out everything that is a product in that food or packaged good that you're eating. And then the third thing that I'm going to be talking about is the actual packaging label. So there are little things like you can see here, it says live well. So they're the little buzzwords or things that might attract you to the package. So we'll talk a little bit about those at the end of the discussion. So I just wanted to give you a little, I always like to start my discussions with a little bit of history of why the things we're talking about are important and a little history of the nutrition facts label. It'll give us perspective on the progression of the label. And it has been around for a little while, but not as long as you might think. It's important to remember as we have this discussion that nutrition is an ever-changing science, and progression of the nutrition facts label reflects those changes and how science is always developing and understanding things about nutrition. The changes of society and the public's nutrition needs is the basis for updates of the nutrition facts label. And these changes are reflected in chronic disease prevention and the needs and ways we prepare foods, as well as the dietary recommendations. So they take into consideration, what we're developing the nutrition facts label, they take into consideration what our needs are. In the years between 1941 and 1966, there really weren't any nutrition labels, except for those that needed to be labeled for special dietary uses, such as particular dietary needs caused by physical, pathological, or other conditions, according to the Institute of Medicine in the US. So they weren't telling you really what was in there unless it was specific to a dietary need. And that was in the, between 1940s and 1960s. Then in the mid to late 60s, packaged food in the US became much more relevant because there was a change in the workforce. So this was when a lot of women started going into the workforce during World War II, and then they stayed in the workforce. So there was a need for more packaged goods, more convenience, so that people could have dinners quick if a woman was working outside of the home. So there became a bigger prevalence, I guess you would say, of packaged food. And that created a little bit more of a need because people wanted to know what they were putting into their bodies. So in the late 1960s, when these became more relevant and people needed it and what they wanted to know, in 1969, the White House Conference on Food Nutrition and Health made a recommendation that the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, as you sometimes hear them call, they recommended that they come up with a system to identify the nutritional quality of foods, whereby instituting that food makers provide truthful information to consumers about the contents of their product. So it's important that that truthful is in there. And you'll hear as we go through and talk a little bit, especially in the packaging area, that sometimes that gets a little exaggerated or is left up for interpretation. So it's interesting that they use the word truthful in there back in 1969. Then in 1972, the FDA created a format and started to implement regulations on nutrition labels that included voluntary labeling unless the product made specific claims about its nutrition. So you didn't have to do it unless you were saying it did something specific. So if you were saying that it was a fountain of youth, it made you younger, then you had to back that up. You couldn't just make that claim. So again, backing on that truthfulness. In 1973, labels were created that contained calories, grams of protein, carbohydrates, fats, and the U.S. recommended daily allowance of protein and various vitamins such as A, C, riboflavin, niacin, calcium, and iron. The FDA allowed discretionary reporting on other items, so they didn't have to have those, but these were the ones that they wanted. So some of the discretionary items were salt or sodium, saturated fat, and polyunsaturated fatty acids. And then not a lot really changed until like the late 1970s, when it was suggested that the nutrition labels be mandated and changes be made to improve the labeling. So that was when they started saying, okay, you're going to have to do this. And in the 1930s, going a little bit backwards here, but in the 1930s, it was decided that companies needed to be cautious about their claims, as I said. And then moving to the 1980s, companies wanted to start to try to make claims again about foods. So they started really reviewing the nutrition facts label and how things were going to be done, so that they could make sure that those claims were at least somewhat accurate and not that misleading to the consumer, to us. In 1990, the the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act, or NLEA, was instituted, and it was the most legislation that had been put forth in 50 years on the nutrition facts label. It gave the FDA the oversight and the enforcement of nutrition labels and required it to be based on a healthy diet and the components of a healthy diet, so that it's widely understood by Americans and the consumers were informed. And that's important that, I think it's still a little difficult to understand the nutrition facts label. So that's important, why my job as a nutrition educator is to go out and teach people about how to read it, because we want to use it as a tool. We want to use it as an advantage. And that's what it's made to do, to make sure that we, can use the information for optimal health results. So not a lot really went on to change the label until about 1993. In January 1993, mandated nutrition labeling in the form of a nutrition facts panel was made to be on most packages. And then again, we had a little lull there and there wasn't a lot going on. But then companies that had sales over $10 million were required by January 1st of last year. And those who had $10 million in sales, under $10 million in sales this year, were required to change up the label again. And we're going to go over what those new changes were. So you will see that some people maybe made packaging changes last year, and now other people are starting to do it this year. And that's because they mandated that sales level of when you had to do it. So that's just a little bit of background about how it developed and why it developed and where we are today. So let's look at where we are today. This is the new nutrition facts label. And I'm just need to move my little screen here so I can see a little bit better. So this is the new nutrition facts label. It's important to remember that the nutrition facts label, as well as the dietary guidelines for Americans, they base their recommendations on the Americans' public health. So they base it on what we need. So as an example for that, when we're lacking certain vitamins or nutrients in our diet as a country, the nutrition facts labels are updated to reflect that. So they might add something, as we'll discuss in a minute, or they might take things off if we're starting to meet those qualifications at that point and get enough of the recommended amounts. To make these updates, the FDA bases the changes on scientific information, which included the link between diet and chronic disease, such as obesity and heart disease. So this new label will make it easier to make more informed food choices, we hope, right? In other words, the nutrition facts labels is designed as a guide for all of us to make the most informed decision on what we can put into our bodies. So it gives you the opportunity to know before you eat something. So let's start right at the top of this graphic, and we're going to talk about what is bolded. So you can see here in the first circle that I put up that the graphic there, it's not a recommended amount, but it's a serving amount. So again, it's really important to know this because people often think that it says 2/3 of a cup and that's how much I should eat. However, that's not the case. The serving size is telling you if you eat 2/3 of a cup of this product, that what you can expect from it is below. 2/3 is what most Americans eat of this product, but that does not mean it's what most Americans need. So the figures supplied on here are based on a 2,000 calorie diet because that's an average range. So people are going to leave maybe more or less of that. And I know if you've ever been to one of my talks before, I often tell you to go to choosemyplate.gov /resource/my plate plan to figure out how many calories you need to maintain your healthy weight with your activity level, your age, and your gender. So think about all the people in your family for a minute, right? All the differences in your family. Some of those people might be maintaining a healthy weight and eat 2,000 calories a day, while others might eat much less. So I'm going to need a different amount than one of my sons, and I'm going to need a different amount than my husband. So, you know, it's going to vary. And this is just based on that 2,000 because that's the average. The other thing that's really important to remember is your activity level. And when you put that in there, that's going to give you the variance because it's going to tell you how much that you're moving and how much you need to move, how much you need to eat to maintain that weight based upon your movement. So to further bring home the point about the serving sizes, I just wanted you to know that the serving size for soda, for instance, was taken in these new updated guidelines from 8 ounces to 12 ounces. Now, obviously, if they're trying to look out for your health, they're not telling you to drink more soda by making that recommendation to go from 8 to 12 ounces. What they're saying by taking the that serving size amount, it's not a recommendation. However, it is the amount most people are drinking. So they did surveys and they found that most Americans are drinking 12 ounces of soda. They also did that because people weren't always understanding the servings per container. So a lot of the old soda labels would have 2 servings per container, and people would think that that meant that what they were drinking on the label was what they were getting, when really they needed to multiply it by 2 because it was 2 servings. So that's just an example of how you understand that this is not a recommendation, but rather the average, and it's just a serving size suggestion, okay? Let's see what else we got here. And up top here, this is this, again, this the servings per container. So in addition to having the serving size of the average consumption, it also tells you the number per container at the top there. So this particular item has 8 servings per container, and that means 2/3 a cup is typical consumption, and the package contains 8 2/3 of a cup servings. So if you're eating the entire package of whatever this is, then you need to take all this information on the label, such as calories, and multiply it by 8. So if you ate the whole package of this, the entire package, it would be 1,840 calories. So again, in soda, they updated it to 1 serving size because that's what people drink. But in granola, for instance, you don't usually sit and eat a whole bag of granola at once. So that's why it's a little bit different in each container. Okay. And here's the choosemyplate.gov, the source for checking out your calorie amount if you wanted to get that. All right. So then the next thing on the label that's displayed, and again, this got blown up. It's much larger than it used to be because they want you to pay attention to it, is calories. So calories total other things on the label like carbohydrates, fat, protein, and alcohol, and they're the energy that we put into our body. And to maintain a healthy weight, we need to balance the amount of calories that we eat with the amount we burn. And that means we need to move, like I mentioned before. And do you remember what I said the guidelines were based on, right? They were based on a 2,000 calories. Therefore, again, you might need more or less. So this is based on this 230 calories is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. The thing that you need to remember too is to look at what might be surprising. So one of the things I took a peek at is that creamer, for instance, coffee creamer might have 35 calories in it. But if you're pouring a whole bunch in there and not the teaspoon that's recommended, like if you pour a quarter cup in there, you're going to add a lot more than those 35 calories. So that could be a little surprising, and you want to make sure that you're looking at how much you're really consuming if you're pouring an extra amount in there. The daily values down the side here have also been updated. The daily values show how much of a particular nutrient contributes to the daily diet value of that serving size. So for instance, if the product you can see here is vitamin D is 10%, they're telling us that one serving size of this product contributes 10% of our need of vitamin D for the day. So be aware that these numbers don't total up. You're not adding those up down the line, but they go across vertically and represent a percentage telling you what the individual nutrient contains towards the daily value. These percentages, like the rest of the food label, are based on the 2,000 calorie diet. Could be more or less for you. Some nutrients on the nutrition fact label don't have a percent daily value. So use the number of grams to compare and choose products. These products, like protein, do not have a daily value percent because there is not a significant need for it in the American diet at this point. We really get what we should of it. That's not to say that there's no percentage for sugar because we don't get what we need, just the opposite. There's no percentage of sugar because there's no set amount needed for sugar for American diet. And as you're probably aware, we do consume way too many sugary drinks and sugary products. So we, obviously don't have a need for that. As I mentioned before, health professionals always contribute and get to put in their ideas and what they're experiencing and observing while they're practicing. So doctors and, RDs, nutritionists, nutrition educators, all contribute and have the opportunity to contribute their opinions and what they're seeing boots on the ground during when they're putting these things together. And because of that, the doctors suggested and put the entry in, which ended up going in here, that they would like some milligrams to be put on here. So for instance, vitamin D, you can see is in milligrams. And that was one of the things that was added to the new labels as well, because the doctor they said, we don't say get 100% of vitamin D a day. They would say to get X amount of, you need to get X milligrams for amount for you. So the doctors asked to have it put into milligrams. So it translated what they were saying to what the people were reading on the nutrition facts label, because again, they want us to be educated and they want us to understand what we're getting and how we're getting food and from what sources. The new label now signals also that added sugar on there. And this is really, that's an addition that's important because before people would see the total sugar and it wasn't broken down. So this, you can see, they show you what is added. And if you want to figure it out, you can figure added sugar. This has 10 grams of added sugar. And how much is a gram, right? Most people don't know how much a gram of sugar is. But if there's 4 grams in a product, that is equivalent to 1 teaspoon. So this product has 10 grams, which means it's approximately 2.5 teaspoons of sugar. So that gives you more of a visualization to try to understand exactly how much of something is in what you are consuming. So you have that idea. Looking at consumption and at the sugar added on the product too, it's good to know how much you're consuming. So sugar does occur naturally in some products, and that's why it's added sugar was the addition to the nutrition label, because it shows how much was added into the product that's not naturally occurring. As a side note to that, products like honey or maple syrup are not required to show added sugar, but they can choose to add a footnote that they are single sugars and none was added, but the equivalent content of the product's percent daily value. Keep in mind that 5% of a daily value per serving is considered low, and 20% or greater is considered high. So this product is rather low in potassium, you can see, because it's only 6%. However, it's high in iron at 49%. So you can see those down the side there. Potassium and vitamin D were added as well to the new label, and they're shown in milligrams and contained as, on the daily value percentage, as mentioned before. These were added because they're nutrients that Americans need to get more of. Our diets have been really lacking in these areas, so they're now added to the label. This is also an example of how the food labels are updated to reflect what we need. We can also fall short of recommended fiber amounts. So, you know, that's one of the areas that we need to watch out too, is the fiber amount. And a lot of times, if you've been to any of my other discussions, I always talk about fiber and how high fiber foods are important to keep our bodies function properly and to help us maintain a healthy weight. Calories from fat has been removed. Oops, sorry. Calories from fat has been removed. You can see at the top there. And rather than the type of fat being emphasized now, I'm sorry, rather than having the total fats there from calories from fat, they're showing us the different types of fat, because that is important to know. So saturated and trans fat are the ones that we want to keep an eye on. Trans fats, for instance, are something that are not supposed to be in products. However, they are in there. And that's one of the things we'll talk about with the ingredients label. It could be in the ingredients label as partially hydrogenated oil, and that's trans fat. But if it's below 0.5 grams, then they don't have to show it. So that's why it's good to check all the parts of the label, as we'll talk about as we go through. Saturated fats, it's important to know how many saturated fats we're getting. So that's why that is on there. And saturated fats are ones that you want to have in moderation. They come a lot of times from animal fats. And so you want to try to eat lean animal, you know, lean types of meat and things like that. And try to have plant-based protein as well, or I'm sorry, plant-based foods, so that you can really have a grasp on keeping that saturated fat low. But not listed on this label, but I have seen it on other labels, are the good fats, which are unsaturated fats, polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. And some labels are choosing to put them on there now. So you might see them under the total fat. And those unsaturated fats are the ones that are better for us than saturated fats. Let me see. I know it's really a lot to take in with all of this, but you know, as you keep reading it and adjusting to it and trying to get used to it, it gets a little bit easier. All right, so let's go on to the next part here, and we're talking about when to check out the nutrition facts label. It's really, like I said, it can be a little daunting, but if you're taking one thing away from today that I really, really want you to remember, is what to know the highs and lows for. So if something has 20%, you can say put that in green, 20% daily value or greater, it's high. So if that's the vitamin or mineral, then that's what we want to be the higher stuff, right? But if it has 20% of some other things, you know, like sodium or sugar or things like that, then we don't want that to be high. So you can use it either way. It goes both ways. But you want to make sure that you're getting more of the good stuff and less of the not so good stuff on the food label. And then 5% things that we want to keep low are the saturated fat, the trans fat, the cholesterol, the sodium, and the added sugar. We want to try to keep them below 5% and then keep the others above 20%. So just try to keep them in mind when you're looking at the nutrition facts label, and maybe then it won't be hopefully quite as daunting for you. I did want to put this up. This is an example of a dual label, and you'll see some of these sometimes too. The nutrition facts labels show the amount in the first column if you ate a snack of this product, which is the average, again, for a third of a cup. And here in the second column shows the amount if the portion size were 2/3 of a cup, which is an average amount consumed for this product. So you see the difference between snack there in the first column, bowl in the second column. Often you'll notice this on packages that people tend to eat the entire container on. And I know I used to have a friend, and there was a little cookies that we enjoyed in a little bag. And he used to say, well, you know, they're little because you're supposed to eat the whole bag. Well, you're really not supposed to eat the whole bag. But for things like potato chips or, you know, a smaller cookie bag, you might see this on that label because a lot of people tend to eat the whole bag. So it'll give you the measurement for the whole bag, and then it'll give you a measurement for like what the actual serving size is. Remember, it's not a recommendation. It's just the average amount. So it's the serving size. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, I really wanted to talk about the nutrition label, or the ingredients label. And I think it's important as we move through and talk about labeling. The nutrition facts label really gives us a lot of information. And if we know what we're looking for, if your doctor has told you to watch your sodium intake because, he's concerned about your blood pressure, then you're probably looking at the sodium intake. But the thing that's important to remember too is that the ingredients label can be an important part of what is in the food as well that might not be reflected as clearly in the nutrition facts label. So an example of that again would be those trans fats where you're looking for the partially hydrogenated oils. So this is an example of what is in a can of beans. So this is beans. And when you're reading the ingredients label for this product, the first four, or any product, the first four contents that are listed, the first four ingredients of the product are what is the most that is in the product. So if there's 10 things in that ingredient list, the first four things are what are the main part of the package. So if something, for instance, has the first ingredient as water, then it's mostly water. If it's sugar, then it's mostly sugar. So that's just another way to kind of depict what's on the label. This label for white beans, as you can see, they're cannelli beans. The first ingredient is water, as salt, and then calcium chloride. So what I'm taking from this, reading it and knowing what I know about the nutrition facts label, my first inclination after reading it might be to check the sodium content if I haven't already, because it has in here that it has calcium chloride. For those of you that don't know, calcium chloride is a sodium that helps to preserve the beans, but it could raise the salt content. So if you're watching salt, you want to watch out for that. Other things the ingredient label tells us is how many ingredients are in the product. This one doesn't have a lot. So fewer products is a good clue that it might be a better food because it doesn't have a whole bunch of stuff in it. But not always, because if you look at the ingredients label of potato chips, they don't have a lot of things in them either. But they generally do have a lot of fat and salt in them. So just because there's less things doesn't mean it's a better thing, but sometimes that could be an indicator that it's more of a whole food for you. Hidden names that you want to look out for. Sugars have many names and they'll be noted in the nutrition facts label as sugar, but on the ingredients label, they might show up as syrup, maltose, sucrose, glucose, lactose, molasses, honey, and even sometimes as nectar, as is in the case with agave nectar. Salt, likewise, can be identified as salt, sodium, and chloride. And you can see on this bean label that calcium chloride is listed, like I said, and that's a salt substitute. So just as a side note, if you're eating beans and you couldn't find the low sodium kind, you can rinse them off and get some of that sodium off of there. You can't do that with every product. So that's why it's good to be mindful of what you're eating. And reading the nutrition facts label will really give you an indication of what's in the product, and then it contributes over to get a better glimpse of what's in there by looking at what's actually going in your body on the ingredients label. So again, it's good to look at all of the label, the whole package good, especially if you're unsure of what is in there. Let me just say, I see that there's a question. Somebody asked about handouts in the Q&A, and I can give some handouts. I can send some to Julie, or I can have my office send some out too as well. Okay, and somebody asked for the resource for assessing how many calories you might need to use in a day. I'll go back to that for you and make sure that I get that to you at the end. I think I have it again, and if not, I'll put it back up again. And is it possible to get too much potassium? That's a good question for your doctor, because I know sometimes different things interfere with medication you're on, or it could be a problem for you. So I would check with your doc on that one. Okay. It's hard to answer questions generally for everybody on certain individual things. Oh, sorry. Okay. So let's talk about misleading packaging for a little bit. So sometimes you'll see low fat, you'll see cage free, no trans fats, whole grain, might see high in protein and fat free, 10% juice, gluten free, no added sugar. All of these are, I don't want to call them buzzwords, but sometimes they really are buzzwords. So we've all seen packages with claims like these on them, low fat, cage free, no fat, all those different things. And all these claims are meant to give you the perception that the product does or does not contain harmful things. And it may just be a means of advertising to attract your attention to the latest buzzword and really, pull you in because you think you're doing something great. It's important that you read the nutrition facts label to discover whether or not these product labels are true to their claim. There's been stricter guidance, as I mentioned, as history has gone on the nutrition facts labels, and regulations have progressed over the years. But checking the entire label is always a good way to ensure you're getting what you think you're getting and not getting what you don't think you're getting. Certain high sugar or high sodium may say that they're a good source of vitamins, but what's the definition of good? One product I examined said it was a good source of vitamins, yet none of the vitamins listed was above 10% daily value. And remember, we talked about 20% was what was a good source. So you want to check those out. I guess if 20% is the best, then I guess 10% could be good. But again, it's in the language, and they're interpreting things and kind of planting things in your head to make you assume this by just looking at the advertisement on there. So that's why it's so important to go back and look at what they really have in them as well. The same product also was high in calories, that had the supposed good, 10%, it was listed as 10% daily value of vitamins and good source of vitamins and minerals. It had high calorie, high sugar, and it was high in fat. Even though it had a small amount of vitamins, it loaded you up on a lot of the things that you didn't want, those empty calories. So that's why it's important to make sure by checking the nutrition facts label and the ingredients, what's in there. Think about what good means before you buy, or better yet, look at, actually what it's broken down as. All right, so here's an example. I always love using this example, and I'm that person that you see in the bread aisle that's reading all the labels, because it's really hard with bread to figure it out. We recommend half your grains be whole grains every day. And if you're consuming a grain product, you want to know what's in it. So here's an example of why the label might mislead you. You can see here on the left, circled in white, it does say that this is a whole grain on the front of the package. However, the first ingredient in the list is enriched wheat flour. And that means that the grain was stripped of its whole grain and then enriched with vitamins and minerals during processing of the food. So they take all the good stuff out, strip it down, and then put stuff back in it and process it. So if the bread was truly whole grain, it would say whole wheat or whole grain flour in the first line. And if you see here what the first line says, it says that it's enriched wheat flour, like I said. But if you search down the lines, you go through, the 10th ingredient is there, and that says that it's whole grain flour. So in the beginning, a few minutes ago, I told you the first 4 things were what most of the package contained, and this is all the way down at 10. So it's probably not really a good source, probably doesn't have as much as you might think. But because it has some in there, they're allowed to say that it's a whole grain. So that's what I'm talking about when I say that, you want to be really mindful of what they're advertising and think about how they're targeting you. Like, again, with that whole good, it kind of is up for interpretation on what's good in everybody's mind. Julie, if you want to release that second poll, you can. Let's see how we're doing. So this is an example. If you're searching for whole grain, then this is a good example of a way to find it, a label on there that you might find that would include whole grain. This is put out by the Whole Grain Organization. You'll find it a lot of times on the side of bread products. So this is actually a good way to know. I'm not clicking here. It's a good way to know if you're searching for true whole grain products. This will be a label also on the council. It's kind of on the label. It's kind of small. It's from the Whole Grain Council, but look for that, because that'll be a clue that you're good to go on that. And it's a whole grain. I have a little bit more about labeling. I did want to ask all of you if you would be so kind. I'm going to put in the chat right now the link here. This is for, there, it went this time. Okay, this is a, to use for an evaluation for me. It gives an idea of how I'm doing, what I'm teaching, if it's good and relevant for you, what we can change. And if you, it really is helpful for me to know again. So if you would go to that link, you could do that. You can also hold up your telephone and open your phone and go to your camera and hold your camera like you're taking a picture of that code there. And if you hold that up, it'll automatically direct you to that link. So you can really easily go there and take that questionnaire for me. It'd be really, really helpful. Thank you. All right, I'll give you a second if you want to open your phone for that. All right, oh, now we're not clicking again. All right, so moving on from there. This is an example of how the label is broken down. So here we have all three labels. And I just wanted to give you a good, kind of idea of what I'm talking about, of putting it all together. Not every package contains that clear understanding of what you are purchasing. So while great strides have been made to make it a true picture, there's no better way than to investigate for yourself. And I always tell the kids that I work with to be a food detective and try to figure it out. Use the nutrition facts label to get the daily recommendations your body needs to be healthy, and use the packaging label to see if the product has or does not have what you want. But double check it by reading the ingredients list in the nutrition facts label. These labels are from the same product. So let's take a really close look at what we're looking at with these before we leave the session. Oh, all right, so we're starting out there with the GMOs. So this product says that it's a non-GMO project and it's verified. And I wasn't really sure, I had not heard of the non-GMOproject.org. So I checked them out and do the same. Like if it advertises something and you're like, what? Check it out. It's worth taking a look at. This is a company, this non-GMOproject.org. They're a nonprofit organization that checks out the product to make sure that it is really non-genetically modified. And a lot of people want to know that the food they're eating hasn't been altered and messed with. So this company will go and verify it, and then they are able to get the verification and put it on their label. So that's a way, just like with the bread, with the whole grain symbol that I showed you on the last slide, it's kind of the same idea as that. So that's where the information is on there circled. All right, so it also says that it's all natural fruit, which most fruit, is usually natural. So they're probably, that's probably true. It's not a false advertisement, but they're giving you the idea, because that all natural is real. People love to know nowadays that things are all natural. And a lot of times, yes, they're all natural, but there's other stuff in there. So the fruit they're saying is all natural, even though that there are some, maybe other things that are included in a product. But you have to be really leery. All natural is one of those things, again, that has a big scope and not a real definition with it. So poison ivy, for instance, is all natural, but we wouldn't really want to eat that. So you have to remember that just because it says it's all natural doesn't mean it's the ultimate health food or anything like that. So be mindful of that when you're checking things out. And the pineapple's there, so it does have pineapple in it, which would be all natural, like I said. It also says that it's rich in vitamin C. So let's take a look over here at, I'm sorry, I have to move us again, I'm blocking. The nutrition facts label here says that it has 20%. So that is, I guess you could say, rich in vitamin C, and that's how they use those different words. There's rich, there's good, but 20% we know is a good amount. That's one of the areas we want to have 20% or higher. And so that is a true claim. And none of the claims that they're making here can really be dispelled, but you want to be able to make an educated decision as a consumer about what you're putting into your body. So knowing this information and knowing what to look out for is always a good idea. So yes, 20%, we're good to go. Then over here, it says it's naturally gluten-free. So for people like myself that have gluten resistance or gluten allergies or celiac disease, this can be really important. And sometimes there's different derivatives of gluten that are found in the ingredients label. So I always try to check both just to be safe and make sure that they're there. Gluten-free, they're not there. And naturally gluten-free, yes, pineapple's naturally gluten-free, but if you've been told by a doctor to, and it should be by a doctor to be gluten-free, it is not a diet. It is because there is a problem with the way your food digests wheat and gluten. It should be recommended by a doctor. But you should make sure that it is really gluten-free in the ingredients label. And you should know that some things are, you would never think, like salad dressings or soy sauce or different things have gluten in them. So if you have been recommended by a doctor, make sure to check that out and make sure that, you know, it truly is gluten-free all around. So there's no gluten in that label, you can see. And then finally, it claims to be BPA-free packing. BPA is sometimes on the inside of a metal can. There's a lining they'll put in there that BPA has been shown to have relationships to causing cancer. Sometimes they're in products such as plastic products or, like I said, metal products. So people want to know that, and people are interested in that again. And again, if you probably went back through history and looked at all the different labeling and packaging, how it changed, and I had 10% juice up there. I remember, you know, back in the day, my mom bought 10% juice because she thought that was good. They were advertising was 10% juice. Well, what was the 90% rest of it, you know? So it's all about how they manipulate those words and make us understand things. So take it whole package into consideration. If you can eat whole foods, pick the whole food. I know sometimes they're more expensive or hard to eat or hard to get at certain times of year. So packaged foods aren't off the, you know, shouldn't be off the table. But if you're eating a packaged food, there's a label on there for a reason. And that reason is to show us what we're eating and consuming. These are all the resources that I use to comprise this presentation. And here's the choosemyplate.gov resource again that somebody had asked for in the chat. I'm going to see if there's any more questions and answers.